Hi everyone, it's Tracy Lewin.
And Peter Murray. Hi, Tracy.
Hi there, Peter. Today is actually a very interesting day because we have two guests from San Francisco.
Oh, very, very interesting. We'd love to hear what they have to say. Are you going,
Absolutely.
are you going to introduce us to them?
Yes, we're actually going to be chatting to two guys that live in San Francisco, and they've started up a business called WeTrust, which is very interesting. So I'd like to introduce Patrick Long and George Lee. Welcome, you guys.
Thank
Hi,
you.
welcome. Very happy to be here.
Great to be here.
Great. So what we're going to do now is, we're going to go through, if we can just go through your slides and talk to it. And of course, if we've got some questions, we're going to ask you as we go along. But we're really, really excited to hear what you have to say.
Yes, so shoot away, guys. If you can tell us a little bit more about WeTrust, what you do, and if you don't mind us sometimes interrupting you with questions, I think that would be great for our viewers.
Great, no problem. So WeTrust is, in a nutshell, a collaborative savings and insurance platform powered by the blockchain. And we'll talk about what exactly that means. But before we get into that, let me do a quick introduction about myself. My name is George. I'm one of the co-founders of this project. My background is I studied at Stanford, worked at McKinsey for a few years, but I've always wanted to kind of get into the technology industry because I studied electrical engineering for undergrad. So after McKinsey, I decided to move back to the Bay Area. I worked for Google for 5 years and left about a year and a half ago to start my first company called Cotton Brew, where we basically used computer vision to figure out body sizes. And but after doing that for a little bit, I decided that I wanted to work on a project that has greater social impact. And since I've been following blockchain for about 2 years now, I kind of sat down with Patrick and tried to figure out how can we blend the two to work on a project that can be really meaningful and also innovative, technologically speaking. So that's kind of how we got started with WeTrust. And I'll let Patrick introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick. First heard about Bitcoins and blockchain back in 2012 from one of my college badminton teammates. He had a small Bitcoin mining rig. Excited. I think that time Bitcoin was around $30, $40 a coin with me, but at the time I was still very busy with college, so very focused on my studies. I studied economics at UC Berkeley, graduated, worked at Ernst & Young for a few years. I earned my CPA there, but at the nighttime I'd always have a small cryptocurrency fund I would manage and sort of day trade. That's how I actually met George, my college roommate, one of my best friends. He rents a room at George's place. So at night, we would grab a few beers, talk about, the new cool investment. And, some of our investments did pretty well. So sort of like financially independent, have some time to work on blockchain. As an accountant, I saw, a lot of inefficiencies in the financial world, right? And that's something, lots of blockchain companies are tackling. Working on sort of keeping records on the blockchain, making it more efficient. And that's something, the financial world can definitely benefit. So as we were trying to come up with, cool ideas to work with, we thought about WeTrust, ROSCAs, the unbanked world. And I think blockchain is, again, something that we can use to help grow that. Again, just a quick introduction with the rest of the team. We also have lots of very strong technical people. Our CTO, he's worked at Google for 10 years. He's leading a team right now of 3 other engineers, 2 of which are full-time. Tom Nash, he's located in London. Very competent individual. You guys can check out our GitHub. He comments out the code really well, talks about what each part is doing. He's working on the front-end design. Shine, he's a true entrepreneur at heart. In his garage, he has this huge Ethereum mine. He's mining ethers. So involved in Ethereum since the start. He's helping develop our smart contracts. On Zhang, right now he's, I guess, anonymous because he's working at a large company, fintech company, and he has to, maintain his anonymity. But he's also contributing sort of on the side as well. Other members of our team, Justin Zhang. Some of you guys might know him as Legion of Seven. That's his Twitter handle, Reddit handle, and he was actually the lead marketer for First Blood in 15 minutes, as some of you know. Very happy to have him on board and share his insights in regards to social media marketing. Fan Li Ji, she's our sort of China community manager. We know China is a very big market, and especially for lending. So I think it's really important to have somebody that knows the culture, knows the communities. So we welcome her on board as well. From an advisor standpoint, I think we have strong people in all verticals. Benedict is an expert at blockchain technology. He created Etherly, the first Ethereum multi-signature wallet. Very capable individual, very knowledgeable about security. He's a platform lead at BitGo. You guys probably know that's the sort of service provider for Poloniex. All those big exchanges store their coins on their wallets. So he, strong knowledge on security. He's advising us as we create our smart contracts. Fenny, very knowledgeable on the sort of cryptocurrency, fintech, legal world. She's a GC at Money Limited. It's a fintech company leveraging blockchain technology to create their credit cards. So she also worked at numerous law firms before. It's Wilmer Hale from Colombia. So very happy to have the legal side covered with her. And finally, on the marketing standpoint, we have Daniel Qari. You guys probably know him as the ex-COO at ZapChain. He's also an editor at CoinDesk, and he also worked at Google for a number of years. So, very happy to have a strong advisory team. So George will take it on from here and then talk about some of the, intricacies of ROSCAs and our project.
Yeah, so before we jump into ROSCAs, I wanted to kind of give a overview to set the context of why we're working on this, and to kind of frame the overall ecosystem. We're looking at this from a kind of economic security perspective. And
guys, can I just ask you a question as well? Just for our viewers, if you guys can just, a lot of guys won't understand the term ROSCA and what it means. So if you can have just a little bit of an explanation on the definition would be great.
Yeah, so a quick definition of ROSCAs. A ROSCA essentially is a group of people who decide on a regular contribution. So a group of people decide on how much they want to contribute and how frequently they want to contribute to a community pot. And then they decide also what are the rules that govern how that money is dispersed. So some ROSCAs decide, say, composed of, say, 10 people, they contribute $10 each month into a community pool, and then they could decide that the money can be distributed to whoever gets into a car accident, or whoever needs that for a family emergency, or whoever needs it to invest in a business. So it's a way for communities to save together, to access credit, but also could also be seen as a form of insurance, depending on how the group wants to organize and set the rules for how money is dispersed, kind of in a nutshell. But we'll go into more detail and go over some real examples to show how that actually works.
Actually, there's obviously there's a lot of countries out there that are already doing something like this, but perhaps not on a platform, and certainly not with smart contracts. So this is very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of strengths to these kinds of organizations, but there's also a lot of weaknesses. And so what we want to do is try to amplify what's already working and make it even better, and then also solve some of the challenges that ROSCAs face. So now ROSCA is basically a way to deal with economic uncertainty, and there's three general ways: government, commercial, and reciprocal, in which ROSCA is one of the major types. However, in the governmental sector, a lot of prominent economists believe that Social Security and other types of benefits may not be sustainable in the long term. And that's not to even mention that most countries don't have any kind of social safety net. On the commercial side, insurance and lending, some people, if they get into emergency, they need to resort to payday loans. These forms of commercial businesses have a lot of overhead, is very expensive, and in our view, it's a commoditized service that can be provided on a lower cost basis. And then reciprocal is another form of way to deal with uncertainty, which has been kind of neglected in the developed world, but is used heavily in developing countries. But overall, we see these as three kind of legs to a stool that represents ways to deal with economic uncertainty, and we want to create tools for the neglected kind of reciprocal aid method. And I think with better tools, more people will want to use that. And many people are looking for alternatives already. It's kind of not just in the developing countries, but people who have access to banking may benefit from this because they're looking for alternatives. And our first step is to create a ROSCA tool. But it's kind of in a deliberate sequence of various products we believe that will be rolled out. Starting with ROSCAs, we want to start with that because it has kind of built-in network effects where you have to invite your friends to get started. So that kind of helps bootstrap the initial creation of closed, trusted communities. And then after that, we want to build out other features such as credit scores on a blockchain. Once, say, the four of us, we agreed to contribute $10 a month, and we encode that into smart contracts. We're then able to track that and see if we all adhere to that, and then build some kind of credit scoring based on that. And then after that, we can have things like mutual insurance and lending. One thing I want to point out is the fiat gateway is listed a little bit further out, but I think that there'll be many benefits if we pull that closer, maybe as a first step to facilitate more usage of ROSCAs. Now, many people might be unfamiliar with ROSCAs, like you said, Tracy, but it's a huge market. 1 billion people use this across the world. It's a $500 billion market in terms of the money that flows through these types of organizations. And the biggest countries that use this is India, Mexico, and other countries in Latin America, China, and even the United States, where there's large immigrant communities who don't have credit scores and is unable to get access to credit. In China, it's interesting because there are a lot of banks available, but many people have gray income and they're not able to prove that they have regular source of income. They don't have pay stubs, so they can't get good credit from the banks. And so they rely on a lot of informal networks. Despite them being a big economy, there's still a lot of shadow banking there. And so overall, it's a huge market across the world. Okay, so here's a diagram kind of illustrating that detailed process of a ROSCA. It's actually very simple. I mean, the diagram looks very complicated because we wanted to kind of explain all the details that are involved. But in this example, you can have Adam, Bill, Carlo, and Diane, 4 people. They decide to contribute $10 per period. Let's just say it's once per month. And the way these ROSCAs work is one person can win once every X periods, where X is just the number of people. So there's 4 people, you win once every 4 periods, basically once per cycle. Pretty simple. Now, the way it works is, say in period 1, everyone contributes $10. There's a pot of $40. Now, who gets that pot of money? Well, in this case, where they decided to use a bidding process, a very common way of running ROSCAs. And the way that works is through a reverse auction, where the lowest bidder wins the pot. And the bid is kind of representing basically a interest rate, and as well as their kind of urgency of need. So in this case, Adam bids 35, Bill bids 40, Carla bids 37. So the lowest bid is 35. He takes the $35, and then the $5 is split evenly between the remaining participants. And so you can see people who take Adam, who would have had to take 4 periods to save up $40, can spend that in the first period, but he's paying some kind of reward for the other people who are saving effectively. And then the next period, it repeats. And then we can jump to the last period where you see that, Diane, well, she's been bidding $40 all along. Basically, she doesn't really need the money for any urgent needs. And so she's collecting kind of an interest from each of these different periods. And since there's no remaining bidder at the last period, she's the only one left. She takes kind of total $40 with no discount. But I think the key takeaway here is, from an economic standpoint, everyone benefits from this arrangement. The people who need the money earlier are able to get that access at a fair rate, and the people who don't need the money are able to get a benefit from trusted associates, some kind of interest. And so that forms a very interesting self-sustainable model, because across the world, most of these ROSCAs are within communities, and the way they disperse the funds, the way they allocate the funds is from a community perspective, what's best for the group, which is very different from, say, microfinance, where if we were to lend to one individual in the village or city to start a new business, that individual might benefit quite a bit and produce at a lower cost and be more profitable, but it crowds out the other participants in that community. Whereas in a ROSCA, this group, there's some kind of social pressure to make sure the funds are used in the best way, as well as defaults are very low. They're much lower than lending from traditional financial institutions because of that social interaction among ROSCA participants.
I just want to ask a question here. Who's actually the keeper of the money, or does it just move to the next? Do people just put it into other people's bank accounts? How does this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in most of these organizations, so in India, for example, these are called chit funds. They would usually have a foreperson, an organizer who's taking a cut, sometimes up to 15% of the pot, just to go around, collect the funds, and then redistribute the funds. So usually there's some kind of organizer, and then in informal fund, there's informal ROSCAs where it's smaller scale. It could be individuals that are just managing it using paper and pen. They get together regularly, meet in person, put the money in the pot, and then just distribute it in person. And so what we want to create, right, is to have smart contracts on the blockchain manage the funds, so that you don't need to have a middleman, and the money is distributed immediately once all the kind of participants send their money into that. So we believe that this will reduce friction significantly compared to in-person interactions. In addition, I have a lot of friends in India, for example. They form informal ROSCAs among their professional groups. So, for example, a group of dentists or a group of lawyers would get together, and they would send money back and forth, and they would track this in spreadsheets and so forth. And it works to a certain extent up to 5 or 10 people. But once you get larger than that, it becomes very unwieldy in terms of how to track all this information. And so, one of the key benefits of what we're building is not just the transparency aspect, but also scalability. to be able to grow these trusted networks to 50, 100, say 1,000 people, and really amplify what this ROSCA can do, the leverage, and what people can really get out of it, as well as better supply and demand. Like in this example here, if you have 4 savers, Adam, Bill, Carla, Diane, they're all savers, then no one really gets any interest because no one's going to bid a lower number. And so you really do need that balance of supply and demand. And that's what we believe a scalable, like a large ROSCA can really, is a big advantage of a large ROSCA versus a smaller ROSCA.
Actually, this sounds amazing because I think, when you're dealing with other people, there is always a chance that they get something wrong or, run off with the money, if you know what I mean, because it has been known to happen. So this way, that's why your name is WeTrust, I would imagine. So I think this is a great concept.
Absolutely. There's been quite a few instances, prominent cases in India where the organizer ran away with the funds and, resulting in quite a bit of hardship for the participants. And what we believe is, creating a smart contract system where even we, as WeTrust, we can't touch the funds, we can't access the funds even if we wanted to. And creating that system would allow more groups to want to try it out, to use this, and it's just safer that way.
I think it's excellent. I really do. Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, it is excellent. I have a question in terms of your the way you're going to take this to the market. You're going to target, you're talking about the unbanked market in India and China and places like this. Your platforms that how available is your application going to be? Is this going to be just a smartphone application, or is it going to be wider than that? Because obviously in these communities, there's large pockets where there's no smartphone access.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, I have to unmute myself. If you jump to slide 12, we talked briefly about our go-to-market strategy, not in a ton of detail, but basically we're building out our MVP right now. And so the MVP will be based on Ethereum blockchain, and it's mainly a proof of concept to prove, if you can jump to slide 12, Tracy, to show that it can work from a technology standpoint. We're going to test this out with the community that's, the crypto community that's familiar with Ethereum, and drive awareness with this group first. And the focus would be more on the social impact, whether with the smaller community. However, once we test out the capabilities of this tool, we want to roll this out to a broader general community, so that in such a way that you don't need to understand blockchain, you don't need to understand what cryptocurrency is, and we want to create a user experience that you can just use immediately without having to understand what's the underlying technology. So we definitely want to make this accessible to the broader audience. Now, as far as the unbanked, there's actually a very large proportion of unbanked who do have access to smartphones. So we want to first work with them as kind of the second step to build this out for those types of users. And then if there's continued kind of lack of access to smartphones, we'll need to investigate how to create a version that's usable for feature phones, which most people now have access to. It's surprising, we have some good friends in Kenya and there's in Tanzania. It's interesting that many of these towns or villages don't have reliable access to electricity, but everyone has a mobile phone, and they will go into kind of these 7-Elevens where there have been kind of entire businesses set up that basically just charge cell phones. They charge a lot of battery-powered devices, and that's kind of become a very important part of the rural economy even. And so we will kind of course, have to play this by ear, but we'll focus first on developing a smartphone app, and then we can evaluate if we can also create a version for feature phones. Now, let's see. That kind of is the, and then if you go on to the next slide, we have a couple of screenshots illustrating an example mock-up of how our mobile app would work. Basically shows you can create a ROSCA, you would enter your information, set the parameters such as how much do we want to contribute, how frequent do we contribute, and how long does this thing last, how many participants, or you can join an existing ROSCA that you've been invited to. And then the following page shows a few examples of how you could keep track of the ROSCAs that you're participating in, the transactions that have gone through so far, and kind of a blockchain-based credit score showing, hey, you're participating in these 3 ROSCAs, you made these commitments, and have you been on time, or have you been late, or have you dropped out, defaulted, and those will kind of form your blockchain-driven credit score. Then go to the long-term roadmap. Our kind of phase 1 is to release our white paper, which is already on our website, WeTrust.io. And then our first focus is to build out the ROSCA, and then build out credit scores. The fiat gateways we're probably going to have to pull in to facilitate greater adoption. I think that's very important. And then phase 2 would be, as you scale up ROSCAs from 10, 20 people to 500 people, 1,000 people, then you can start talking about insurance type products. And so that's why that's in phase 2. Initially, we want to focus on group lending. ROSCA is essentially, credit issuance within a trusted circle. But as we get into phase 2, as people establish credit identities on a blockchain, we can then facilitate direct P2P lending. And then phase 3, these groups could rival commercial banks in terms of the leverage and the pools of money that you're talking about. And so there could be more even commercial lending to businesses. And then reciprocal organization management tools. If you have large groups of people, there will need to be ways to kind of create perhaps the voting mechanisms for groups to decide on how they want to run their organization, what they want to do with excess premiums that were generated on the platform for insurance, and other kind of organization management tools that we'll need to build out. So that kind of is our long-term vision. At the moment, of course, subject to change based on the feedback that we're getting from the community. We have a Slack channel that it's been created. We've been getting a lot of great feedback there. And so we're continually incorporating, of course, we have our own kind of very strong vision, but we're also, of course, adapting and adopting people's ideas if we feel that it makes the product better. So that's kind of what we have for a presentation. I think would be great if we just, open up to other questions you guys might have.
Yes, I have another question. If somebody comes from in your commercial world or in your normal world at the moment, you're getting a credit union, which is basically a community credit union. And I think the question from these guys would be, what is the advantages of using WeTrust compared to our current credit union, where we have similar products and the same type of community concept, but using the normal banking system?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the benefits, in addition to getting access to credit in a different way, there's a couple things. There's, when you save as a group with trusted associates, many people have done studies to show how effective you are actually saving. And the research indicates that it's kind of analogy would be group exercise. So a lot of people have trouble saving money, and by participating in a group, by having this agreement among folks, you have more motivation. You have better adherence to your savings goals, because in that ROSCA, you committed, hey, I'm putting in $10 every month, and you don't want to. It's not just about you anymore. You don't want to let your peers down, and it's that kind of a virtuous cycle that ensues. Now, as far as credit unions, in India, for example, a lot of my friends who moved back after leaving McKinsey, they still participate in ROSCAs because when they put their money into the credit union or the bank, the interest rate, the savings rate, interest rate is sometimes not as good as what they can get by saving with peers. And when they take out loans, it's at a higher interest rate when you take out a loan from the credit union. And so it seems like it's just from a basis of self-interest and wanting to save money. You can make more money or get a better loan by working in these circles many times.
I just want to add really quickly too, the credit unions also have a physical location, right? They're still, although they're nonprofit, right? And although the account holders are the owners, right? They still have the physical location. They still have a lot of the overhead cost, right? And I think that's where technology, especially blockchain and smart contracts, can make it significantly more efficient. There's going to be significantly less fees, overhead, and again, those can be passed on back to the policyholders.
That is very true. I'm just thinking now, this whole concept would apply to any entity that actually, creates a pool of money that needs to be distributed. And I'm thinking specifically, have you guys thought about the application of this in charitable giving? Because it would actually be the same concept. The distribution would just be different.
Yes, absolutely. There's many ways to decide on how this money will be spent. As ROSCAs, as you kind of rightfully say, they can be used for issuing credit, but they can also be used for other goals, such as we all decide to contribute a fixed amount for this cause. Can contribute this amount for because we want to go on vacation together 1 year from now, or we want to contribute to a investment fund or a private syndicate that would then we could jointly make investment decisions on to other companies. And so it's this concept of pulling money together so that, as one individual, you may not have the wherewithal, but with a trusted group of friends, you could rival other investment funds and create your own kind of angel fund. So each group could adapt this type of setup for their own purposes. You can adapt it for purposes of acquiring for access to credit for the unbanked, for the banked who have money and are not doing it for the purposes of getting credit. They can use it for different purposes. That's absolutely correct.
How long you guys are at the moment? As you said, you're busy with your first stage proof of concept. When do you see this product actually, going to market and becoming available to the general public?
So the MVP that we're building out right now will be available in about 4 weeks. However, that will be running on a Ethereum related platform, so it's not it will be more for the tech savvy. But after we kind of finalize and figure out the technological components, we expect to have a version that's usable for the public in about mid 2017. And the reason is because we want to make the user experience very smooth, such that you don't really need to understand or know what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin and I guess the blockchain will be more of the underlying infrastructure, and we want to make that usage very, very smooth. So about mid 2017 is our target for a more consumer friendly version.
Sounds very exciting, I have to say. And I'm sure there's going to be people who are listening to this this video and watching it, watching your presentation, and I'm sure they're going to want to get involved because we do know that this type of system is working in the world, and there's a place for it.
Yes, I have another question, and I think the big elephant in the room for all digital companies, whether they anybody that's on the internet these days, cybersecurity. And I mean, there's two aspects here. Firstly, you've got the blockchain, which we know is security-wise is a lot more robust than a central server. Mm-hmm. But in terms of your client or the people that are actually taking part in the ROSCA, I assume this information is still going to lie on a central server somewhere, so that's still vulnerable. Have you guys given any thoughts on security and also, maybe ways to actually even decentralize information?
Ways? Did you say ways to decentralize information?
Yeah, if possible. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not a tech person, so I would love to hear if that's possible.
Yeah, so our ultimate goal is to make this app as decentralized as possible. And you're absolutely correct that there will be certain aspects on the front end that will need to be centralized. And some will have to be a judgment between how much do we want to centralize versus decentralize, because there are certain benefits. And it's a trade-off between there are certain things that if we decentralize will be more costly. And so it's a trade-off that we'll need to really balance. And what we plan to do is make all of our decision-making processes open and public so that the community can also know why we made certain trade-off decisions. And as a community, we can decide, hey, which areas make sense to centralize and which areas make the most sense to decentralize. Certain things, for example, like access to the funds, that will for sure be decentralized so that we don't become a target for hackers who want to get access to these funds, right? And then the question is, how much personal information do we want to retain? And maybe it's just the email address, ability to log in. And so there's a lot of these debates that are going on internally within our team. And I think we'll definitely share these decisions with the community and then get feedback as far as, so that they understand why we did these things and how we kind of evaluated these trade-offs.
I think also the question would be, are you guys going to come up with specific security measures that would give people more comfort? Because especially, what happened in the last year with Ethereum and some of the things that were developed, there are a number of security breaches. And what specific things would you tell people to make them feel comfortable to use your platform that would be different or would enhance security?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things I want to mention. One is regarding the platform selection. So Ethereum is what we're using just for the MVP, but we are evaluating and open to other platforms. There are many of them that are competitive and being developed, such as Rootstock, Dfinity, which is being built by String Labs, just down the street from us. And so that's something we need to evaluate as from a security perspective as well, to see what is the best platform to build our product on. And then as far as security, we will need to build in fail-safes because people might forget their password, they might lose access. And so we'll need to create some fail-safes where, if you're sending money to a smart contract that we create, and somehow you lose access and aren't able to withdraw, then we need to be able to kind of free that money so it's not just stranded. And that money we have some ideas. For example, it could be a escape hatch where the money will go to the organizer of the ROSCA. And because you're a participant of a ROSCA and you're invited by them, it's someone you trust. So now, as far as if you have your own wallet that's provided by a third party, we don't intend to create our own wallet. So you would need to use a third party wallet, and we would provide certain recommendations on how to protect yourself in terms of keeping your private keys safe. So I think those are things that we need to continue thinking about. But we are building some ideas into the product, even in the MVP, so that your money is safe.
It's just interesting, I'm looking at this whole industry, and I'm seeing in all companies we have the traditional roles, the CFO and the investment officer and the chief technical officer, but I haven't seen companies come up with a chief security officer yet. I think it's time.
Oh yes, absolutely. In this industry in particular, because that's almost the entire bedrock or foundation of this product. Has to be security. Absolutely.
Okay, well, those are the questions I've had. Tracy, I don't know if you've had any other questions.
No, in fact, what I'm looking forward to is more interviews with you guys and progress. We want to know all about it. And, are you going to be available for those follow-ups?
Absolutely. I enjoyed this conversation. It's our first interview, and I'm sure the future ones will be more, will evolve in nature. And we'd be very, very glad to continue this dialogue and share the progress with you guys, and maybe get some of our other team members on here as well.
I'd love to talk to all of them.
Absolutely.
Well, it'll be a party.
Well, thank you, guys. We'll definitely be in contact very shortly and talk to you guys again. And in 4 weeks' time, you said you're going to have something on the table. So maybe that will be a good opportunity to talk to you guys again.
Absolutely. And look forward to that.
Excellent. So thanks very much for making the time to chat to us tonight, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.